to do that. A lot of us work on systems where that's just not practical as much as we want to do it. Right? We might build it in 2-week slices, right? Vertical slices of functionality, but there may not be enough of it, or our customer base may not allow us to release it every 2 weeks, because in certain businesses that's just too fast. They can't consume change at that rate. You'd overwhelm them. I'll give you an obvious example. I do work with a controls manufacturer. These are the controls that go into manufacturing plants or breweries. They'll update like every 5 or 10 years. And if I came out with an update every 2 weeks, they're going to look at me and go, you want me to do what in my factory? It's working just fine. If I take your update and anything goes wrong, I will be the goat that someone's coming to slaughter. All right? I'll update in 5 years. You guys feel free to go ahead and put your releases out every 2 weeks, and I'll update on a 5-year cycle. Don't tell me when I should update in my business. Right? Fine. That's their cycle. You deal with it. Let's push forward. We got a lot to talk about. All right, so to the point of making it visible. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just talk this one through just because of time reasons. How are you making your technical debt visible so other people can see it? Please?
We put it in Jira.
Put it in Jira. A common approach, right? Put it into whatever system you're using for managing work or defects, put it there. Is that visible to management and technical folks, or just the technical people?
The product owners and everybody on the team.
Product owner and everybody on the team, right on.
How do you do it with a small startup company that doesn't have a tool like Jira?
You don't have to have a tool like Jira.
There are tons of free tools on the marketplace.
Okay, so we're hearing put it in some kind of tool to manage it that way. What else? Got it in the very back.
Showing the statistics for the previous release.
So show the statistics on the previous release. So give them some real numbers to look at, okay?
Yeah, assign the dollar value to the debt.
Assign dollar value to that. Yeah, Barry and I were talking about this before, right? The Gartner study, 361 a line of code.
That's right.
So people are trying to do that. To a certain extent, I'll argue that a lot of that's still research work, meaning there's a conference every year that historically has taken place in Honolulu in January, so good conference for you to want to go to, where it's on technical debt. Right? And a lot of the papers you see at that conference are on how would you measure and communicate the extent to which we have it. So for some, it's still a research problem. Please.
So in terms of measuring and putting in Jira, today we're working on a thing where we want to rename a method. Right? So it had a lower or uppercase G, and we wanted to change it to a lowercase g. It took us 45 minutes to do that and feel comfortable with the change.
Yeah.
Right? So in a good system, that should take me about 5 seconds. Right? I hit the refactoring keystroke and I'm done. How do I put a quantity on that technical debt?
I wouldn't.
But that's what I'm paying, right? Like instead of paying that programmer for 5 seconds worth of work, I pay them for 45 minutes worth of work. That's a pretty high technical debt cost.
Let's work our way towards that then. All right, that's fair. What else? I'll show you some examples of how now I'm showing you examples of what I've seen other companies do, and you can evaluate whether you think any of these would be useful in your context. Right? Maybe some will, maybe none of them will. Financial reporting, cost of change, velocity, and sort of what I call gross quantification. I'm going to illustrate each of these. No, I have yet to see a company do this. I would love it if someone would. I mean, technical debt. Why wouldn't you just represent it as line items on your balance sheet of the company? Other forms of debt, long-term and short-term, are represented on the balance sheet. Put in a debt item. Now, that would assume, of course, you had the ability to quantify it. I guess if it was $3.61 per line of code that was required in refactoring, maybe we would have a way of quantifying that if we knew how much we factored. Again, I've yet to see a company do it, but I mean, I think about the number of companies that I've worked with that have acquired other companies and blindly acquired all their debt and didn't know about it. Been helpful if it was on the balance sheet. So that might be one way to come up with a financial quantification, but I'd like to try something a bit more practical initially because I'm not sure how you measure that exactly. This, I think, let's see if this corresponds to your intuition. Cost of change curve. Right, so cost of change, of course, being what will it actually cost us to make a change in the product that we're dealing with? And you'd like to think that in the presence of low technical debt, the cost of change curve stays flatter. It becomes more aggressive in high technical debt. And actually, if you think about the inflection point where that graph starts to go exponential, that's your tipping point. that tipping point we talked about where, the straw has now broken the camel's back. And beyond this point, there's no good options left. Well, that's when your cost of change starts to go up. I mean, the principle you really want here is small change. In sort of small change in requirements should yield small change in implementation. Larger change in requirements should yield larger change in implementation. You'd like that linear principle to be true. There is a point in time where it's not, but you want it to be flatter here and higher there. So maybe what you start to realize is it's taking us longer and it's more expensive to put in changes that in the past, that which was simple and cheap last year is complex and expensive this year. That might be the first indication to a business person that something's wrong here. I don't understand why the curve is moving on us. So maybe we take an approach like that. I mean, the obvious thing, how many people here measure velocity? Teams measuring velocity? Not all teams do. It'd be hard to do some of the calculations during release planning if you're not. Typically, the first way most non-technical people start to realize that there's a debt problem is the velocity curve starts to move in the wrong direction. Down, principally, right? I mean, we were going up, we kind of plateaued, but then it started to sort of go down, and then maybe we hit that tipping point and it starts to go down really fast. That's when a business person will start to get visibility. Like, last year, you guys were averaging like 40 points per sprint, and this year you're averaging, 30. What happened? I kind of expected to go the other way. Why is it going down? Well, again, last year that which was simple and easy is now complex and time consuming because we've got to dance around all the shortcuts. That's likely when they're going to see it. This curve over here, sort of the time, cost versus time curve, if you look at it, this is that tipping point I've been referring to. This is the problem. You could view this as the cost of change curve, right, or the cost of delay curve for technical debt. It follows what I call an intangible pattern. What is the cost to you today, this very day, if you don't address the technical debt? Well, we have other more important things that have to get done today that have a larger cost of delay, so fairly low. And that attitude prevails, and and eventually we start accruing more and more debt, and then all of a sudden, this curve starts to go up. And then it shoots up, right? And at that point, you've crossed that point where you just don't have those good options left. So graphs like these might be some indication that we're experiencing a debt problem. And then, in terms of gross quantification, since debt was defined to be multidimensional, just t-shirt size it. Just t-shirt size each dimension for me. I think we have sort of large design debt. I think we have small test coverage debt. I mean, we've got a lot of good test coverage here, but we have some that's not, so we've got a small amount of debt there. Oh yeah, we've got a large manual testing debt here, right? 0%, right? Is automated, so very large at that point, or release management or continuous integration. So whatever the dimensions are that you think are meaningful in your domain, just t-shirt size it. Small, medium, large, extra large, to give people some indication. In trend data, is it getting worse or is it getting better along that dimension? That's oftentimes helpful enough to communicate with the other people who aren't intimate with what we're doing. Something as simple as that.
Do you find that they take, when having, gone with t-shirt size, they don't take it serious because, they believe it's a little ambiguous. It's more of a swag than closer to hard numbers. So I'm just wondering your field, like, to show management, not even top management, but even middle management saying, look, I've got, really big problem with defects. And
Right.
it's extra large. I'm just wondering your feel on that.
I'll say it in the nicest way that I can and try not to offend anybody. I think management that's so focused on quantifying these down to 2 digits after the decimal point are the ones that aren't ever going to get it.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, right, the people, you use the word swag with regards to t-shirt sizing. I'm arguing the only way initially you'll quantify this with any accuracy at all is to t-shirt size it. You won't be very precise, but you'll be accurate. And the only thing I need you to be upfront is accurate about this magnitude of the problem. And my guess is you will very accurately find the right t-shirt size. You won't accurately come up with a number. Please.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, first of all, I would assume that if your defect size is high, you're probably high on your manual testing, and you should be high on your release management. And is there a way to show this to management team, saying that if I work on the manual testing day, the other two are going to go down?
I think you would probably want to do something like that when you were laying out what your strategies were for how we were going to address it. Because if I was your senior manager, I'd go, okay, I think I have a better understanding of what the problem is. Now, what do you plan to do about it? And you can say, well, we're going to start here because it's almost like the bowling pin strategy. If I can take down the number one pin, it'll naturally let me take down these, and then the next set, you can lay out your strategy for it. But you need some way of communicating it, and lacking a formal methodology, just t-shirt size them. And my guess is you can do it. Please.
Can we do some thresholding just for visibility? So if management already know if something going like a large or extra large, so they need to be worried about those. So they have already in mind their threshold value. That what are the like a debt which they have to focus, and what the debt they can take on.
So is there a threshold type value here that, it's like if you exceed this limit, the warning alarm goes off, and,
Right.
you start discussing what the consequences. I can see there might be some practical value, right, in doing that. The issue, though, is that you'd be crossing like a t-shirt boundary at this level, because you don't actually have quantified data. It's like, well, if our defect level actually goes from, what is it, large, where's defects? Can it go any higher? Double XL. Then you've crossed the threshold. Please.
So one way that we've actually used t-shirt sizing and quantifying is we actually put a range in there. And we're like, an extra large is X number of hours or days or whatever the team wants to do. And then there's 20 plus. And our extra large is anything that's 20 days plus on effort.
Nice.
We know for sure we must do something about
And
breaking that down.
I'm all about the range. I do the ranges when I use t-shirt sizes for epic level estimation or portfolio level estimation, right? I can tell you, if I ever tell you a project is a small, it's between 10,000, or an extra small, it's between $10,000 and $25,000. If it's a small, it's between 25 and 50. So ranges like that make sense to me because it communicates, it's a bucket. And I'm telling you sort of what the size of the bucket is. The next step after this is to see if you can put ranges on it. I'd be willing to do it even without the ranges, just gut feel, because that's your swag. And I actually think
Yeah.
you'll do it reasonably well versus trying to put a number.
Yeah, that's what we do. We